Hey class, in this recording we are going to finish up our digestive system. We're going to focus on the entire large intestine and work our way all the way down to the anal canal. So let's dive into it. As we look at the large intestine, we'll go ahead and pull up our digestive system view. This is the large intestine as a whole, so I'll go ahead and highlight the whole thing. There's our large intestine. And the first main structure of the large intestine is the cecum. The cecum is referred to as the blind pocket, and it's going to receive chyme from the small intestine. Hanging down inferiorly from the cecum is the appendix. And that appendix is going to have primarily immune functions. It has a lot of secondary immune tissues in it. The part of the large intestine that heads superiorly is the ascending colon. Then it goes across the abdomen with the transverse colon, heads down with the descending colon, squiggles around with the sigmoid colon, and then we'll work our way down to the rectum. And from the rectum, we go to the anus, or anal canal. Let's see if I can highlight that. There we have our anal canal. And then we finally have the opening at the end where the feces is removed from our body. That opening is the anus. So that's this overview of the large intestine. We have some structures I want to highlight for you, though. First, we have the rostrum. And I'm going to go ahead and shrink that down just a skosh. There we go. Actually, shrink that down just a little bit more. Let's go with a 9. There. So we have the rostrum. The rostrum are going to be in the large intestine, and they are these pockets on the large intestine. So here in Visible Body, we can't necessarily highlight the individual rostrum, but I can annotate the screen. So we can see these bulges. Oh, let me click on the little pencil there. These bulges are referred to as the rostrum. And they are going to move. They're not static, or stationary. They tend to move along the length of the large intestine to move the feces we have through our large intestine. We also have the tennae coli. The tennae coli is this linear band of muscular tissue that goes along the length of the large intestine. And as we look at some of the histology, the large intestine is going to be lined with a simple columnar epithelium and a lot of goblet cells. So as I pull up the histology guide link, I want to first emphasize structure and function here. The large intestine is not going to focus on maximizing surface area like the small intestine did. Instead, the large intestine is going to absorb some water, but we're going to also produce lots and lots of mucus to aid in the lubrication and passage of feces. So as we look at the lining of the large intestine, I want to emphasize that it has a relatively smooth surface to it so that feces can travel easily through it. As we look at this particular photomicrograph, there are some unique stains used. So the goblet cells, instead of being clear, are instead going to have the mucus stain dark purple. So these regions of these large dark purple regions, those all represent individual goblet cells. So we can see there's a very high concentration of goblet cells within the large intestine. It produces a lot of mucus. I can go here and click on the digital histology link as well to better emphasize that lining of the large intestine. Unfortunately, with these links, we can't zoom in. And it's loading. Come on, high-speed internet, don't fail me now. So here we can see another view of the large intestine, but just with a different stain, so that the goblet cells aren't stained dark purple. Again, I want to emphasize the relatively smooth surface. The tissue type that lines this large intestine is that simple columnar epithelium. And if I just go ahead and zoom in right here, we can see that stereotypical simple columnar epithelium lining the large intestine. Let's talk about the regions in more detail. Separating the ascending colon from the transverse colon, we have the hepatic flexure, also referred to as the right colic flexure. So I'm going to go ahead and add the liver. So we'll just add the whole liver here. So we can see how this bend right here, where we transition from the ascending to the transverse colon, this bendy point is sometimes referred to as the hepatic flexure or the right colic flexure, because it's on the right side of the body, or on the liver side. The other flexure is referred to as the splenic flexure. I'll go ahead and add the spleen. Here's our spleen. So this bend right here, right next to the spleen, can be referred to as the splenic flexure or the left colic flexure. Let's move on and just re-highlight the rectum after the sigmoid colon. So here we have the rectum. The rectum is where feces is gathered and compacted, and as the rectum distends, that triggers our defecation reflex. And as we transition from the rectum to the anal canal, what we're going to see is a transition in our histology. The anal canal is going to be exposed to some external environmental factors, so it needs to be a little bit more abrasion resistant. And then the rectum is still deep within the body and it's not designed to withstand as much abrasion. So if I pull up this on Histology Guide, we have the recto-anal junction here for you. Here on the rectum end of the spectrum, we have the highest concentration of bacteria present in the large intestine, and that goes hand in hand with the highest concentration of goblet cells. So here where we have just an enormous concentration of goblet cells and a simple columnar epithelium, this is going to be the rectum of the rectal anal junction. And then on the anus end of the spectrum, the anus can be exposed to the external environment. So we actually are going to have a stratified squamous epithelium. And if we look at these superficial layers, they are keratinized. You cannot see the nuclei that are present, and because you cannot see the nuclei, that tells you that they've been fully keratinized. This means that it's waterproof and mechanically toughened to resist abrasion. We think back to before the invention of toilet paper, many people would wipe their butts with sticks, leaves, corn cobs, whatever they could get a hold of, and that rectum, that anus would need to resist that abrasive force. And then where they merge together, we have the recto-anal junction. And I want to note that it's not a nice tight transition like the gastroesophageal junction. We are going to have a region of intermediate tissue where the tissue is not keratinized. So right here, the stratified squamous epithelium has not yet been keratinized, but if we move a few millimeters over to right here, if we move a couple hundred microns over to right here, it now is keratinized. So as we look at this, some take-homes are that the rectum has a simple columnar epithelium, lots of goblet cells, and the goblet cells will help to prevent bacterial invasion of our bodies. I also want to emphasize that the simple columnar epithelium, because there's only one layer of cells, is not designed to resist that many abrasive forces. Foreign objects, generally speaking, should not go up into the rectum. As we look at the anus on the other end of the spectrum over here, the anus has a stratified squamous epithelium that is fully keratinized. So this has many layers of cells that are sacrificial, so it can resist abrasion, and the keratinization allows that tissue to be toughened and waterproofed. Let's talk about the anal canal and external anal sphincters. So we're all done with that histology. As we look at the sphincters, we have two sphincters associated with this, the rectum. The external sphincter, notably, is going to connect to the tailbone or the coccyx. So for those of you who've ever had the displeasure of a broken tailbone, I am one of those individuals, there's a very important muscle here that pulls on the tailbone when it constricts. And you really feel it when that happens if you have a broken tailbone. As we are looking at the anus itself, I want to emphasize the anus is the opening of the anal canal. And I know this isn't on your lab objective sheet, but it's still kind of cool to see. So as we're looking at the internal sphincter, here we can see that internal sphincter that's been sliced. And if we're looking for the external sphincter, here we can see this larger mass of muscular tissue. That's the external sphincter of the anus that allows for us to close off and pinch off the anus. So that's all we have for our discussion of the large intestine. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them in the class discussion board or to shoot me an email. And as always, happy studies.